Hello and welcome to EVN Talks. My name is Maria Titizian, and today I'm joined by Roxanne Makasdjian. She's the co-founder and executive director of the Genocide Education Project, otherwise lovingly known as GenEd. And it's an organization dedicated to helping American educators teach about genocide and human rights with a particular focus on the Armenian Genocide. Roxanne, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Maria.
I had all this, lovely introduction written that I was going to read, but I decided not to and just have a conversation with you because it's always interesting when you meet someone with whom you connect immediately. And I've been following your work for years, and people oftentimes in the Armenian world complain about everything, right? We complain about everything. And we always say, I'm just one person. How am I going to make a change? Well, sitting before me is you, who by yourself, if I'm not mistaken, has made an incredible change. You were the co-founder of this incredible program because you saw that there was a gap, a need. And it's always that kind of visionary, right? That person who sees the need and instead of sitting idly by says, okay, I'm going to do something about it, as scary as it might be. So tell me how the whole idea came about. What gave you the courage almost to say, I don't care how impossible it is or people tell me it's not going to work, I'm going to do it. Walk me through that.
Well, Maria, first of all, thank you very much for having me. I've followed your work for many years too and been very inspired by it. No, I did not by any means start GenEd on my own, single person. Nobody ever does anything that way, right? We have influences from everywhere. We have encouragement from everywhere. We have people that when you say, I have this idea, they'll say, we'll walk beside you, we'll walk with you into this project. And we did it. And I must say, I didn't think about, and nor was I told by anybody, this is too hard, you can't do this, or it won't work, or whatever. If they did, I wasn't listening. I just said, we're going to try this. So I had been involved in Armenian community activities all my life. And part of that, of course, was advocating in my local cities and in my state, California, and on the federal level for recognition of the Armenian Genocide and education for about the Armenian Genocide. I was convinced that if the U.S. is going to understand Armenia and work with Armenia and help Armenia and stand side by side with Armenia, I'm talking before independence, but even after independence, lend a hand to Armenia in becoming a democracy and everything else, then those politicians need to have an understanding from early on in their lives about the Armenian Genocide, for instance, and why Armenian Americans exist in the numbers that they do. It seemed to me that we were constantly having to educate anew those politicians. They hadn't heard about us, and sometimes they questioned the Armenian Genocide because how could it be that they had never learned about it if it was such a big deal, as we're saying, the biggest humanitarian crisis that happened during World War I, and the legacy of it still continues. And Armenians still await justice for that as a means even to help after independence happened, now as a means to secure Armenia as well, to help secure Armenia as well. So all of this was in my mind, and I thought, so students, especially beginning with high school, need to learn about this. It needs to be part of the factual history they learn about when they're learning about especially World War I and world history. Why is it that it's unthinkable that students would, when they learn about World War II, not learn about the Holocaust? You wouldn't think that couldn't be possible in the United States. How is it that when they learn about World War I, there's not a mention of, and by the way, this nation was murdered under the cover of World War I, and what were the conditions under which that happened? What allowed it to happen? And what is the aftermath of that? In the 80s, there was a movement in the California Armenian community that was eventually successful, albeit lots of opposition from Turkish government forces, to include the Armenian Genocide in the curriculum of California schools. Not a mandate, not a requirement, because education in the U.S. doesn't work that way. But a strong recommendation was sent down from the California legislature to the Department of Education of California that it would be good to include the Armenian Genocide in the curriculum. So after fighting so hard, we thought that the work was done when that passed.
But it never is it?
It never is.
Yeah.
There was no funding appropriated to schools in order to create curriculum, train teachers on how to teach this very sensitive, difficult topic. It was just a recommendation. And about 10 years after that, I myself, talking to my Armenian American kind of activists in San Francisco, working in the community, I wonder what happened with that law. I wonder if our schools are teaching about it now. They're supposed to be. I wasn't a teacher. I didn't know how it worked. I assumed that the legislature passed a rule and the Department of Education was now supposed to incorporate it. It was going to trickle down into the classrooms. I learned soon that that's not the case. We did a survey of the school districts around San Francisco and found that indeed, it was not being taught. Some of the school district officials are saying we didn't even know such a law was passed. And we were not given any lesson plans and we were not given any training. And we actually would like to teach about this alongside other genocides and alongside what else we teach about World War I, et cetera. But we're not prepared to do so. And this is a difficult topic. We need help doing this. That was the inspiration.
Isn't it incredible, right? So we do activism oftentimes, and I was doing that when I was living in Canada, and we have a small win, something happens, and we all go about our day. We really are not good at follow-up. So isn't that fascinating? Yes. Yeah, because you said at the beginning that students should be taught, and the first thing that comes to mind is, well, do the teachers know, and where are they going to get their source materials from, and who prepares the curriculum? So it's always an uphill battle, regardless. And now with a very complex story that history that you want to teach. So tell me. So in 2005, what did you do? Like you just you talked to people and they said, let's do something. And
yes, we went to the school board of San Francisco. Okay, they supervise the schools in San Francisco, a number of high schools. And we said, hello, do you know that this law was passed? And do you know it's recommended that you should be teaching about this? And they said, no. And we said, well, this is what it's all about. And they said, and we can help you, and they said, yes, we would like to do this, and we will work with you to make this happen in our school district. So for 1 year, we worked directly with the director of social studies curriculum for the San Francisco School District. We were so lucky along the way that we hit on people that were very sympathetic and supportive of this cause. And one of them was that first social studies director of San Francisco. He didn't need any persuasion. He said, this is the right thing to do. Let's work together. And he found 2 world history high school teachers in the San Francisco School District who were actually on sabbatical for a year, meaning that they were allowed time off to do some self-improvement, to do some professional development of their own, and come back after the year with more materials, with more energy, and with a different perspective on teaching their students. So they agreed, these 2 world history teachers agreed to work with us. We met every week. We gave them the resources and the background materials that we knew of and we had. We discussed with them the different emphasis here and there in the curriculum. And together we created a binder full of materials. At that time, teachers were not going to the internet, and they had absolutely, there were no high school level lesson plans on the Armenian Genocide. So we were starting from scratch. And so that first binder was literally a step-by-step instruction manual for
Did you
teachers.
work with teachers? I mean, you're talking about, like we said, a complex topic. Were you looking at methodology, at pedagogy? Who was involved in those initial phases?
Those three people were the key. And then when we were done, meaning the social studies curriculum development department leader and these two world history teachers.
Okay.
So we together did this. When we were done, we wanted to make sure that the California Department of Education, the highest educational body in the state, also would approve of this, because we were going to count on them to put their stamp of approval and disseminate it, hopefully. So we met with their social studies division head as well to have him review the draft we had come up with. And then when our first draft was done, and what we did with that draft was give teachers a choice. Do you just have 2 periods in your semester to teach about this? Here's a lesson. Can you do more? Can you do a week? Here's how to deepen it over a course of a week. Can you do even more? 2 weeks worth of curriculum? Here's 2 weeks worth of curriculum, and here's how it helps you meet the standards of teaching that are already set for you. So there are guidelines of California, and each school district has their own guidelines for world history course for 10th grade world history, what themes must be taught and what particular events must be taught, and what the methodology is. So it was very important for us that our lesson plans fit into that scheme so that teachers wouldn't feel like this was an add-on, that they had to somehow find more room in their semester to fit it in. We wanted them to be able to use our curriculum to fulfill the requirements that were already set for them, using the Armenian and that's why our first set of lesson plans was called Case Study in World History, the Armenian Genocide, a case study, so that they were using the Armenian example to fulfill all of these other requirements they were already set. And then when we were done with that, we did a pilot trial. We brought all the San Francisco social studies teachers into a room, and we gave them 1 full day training. And we did extensive interviews with them to find out what works, what doesn't. Do they have issues with any part of it? Is it something that they could seamlessly put into their curriculum? And we got such good feedback that that's when we made the decision. This could be a real organization, an independent, nonprofit, simply educational organization that we could take on the road to different schools and different places across the country.
States.
Eventually, we got everywhere. Yeah.
You got everywhere. And not only did you get everywhere, for the past 4 years now, you've been bringing American teachers to Armenia. And I saw the agenda. I mean, it's pretty packed. So they come and they spend, was it 10 days, I believe, at the Armenian Genocide Memorial Institute. And you give them, it's like what is the word I'm looking for? Like a fast-tracked, glimpse into what it means to be Armenian, not only about the Armenian genocide, but you're giving them, and now with the loss of Artsakh and the ongoing, what we feel is the continuation of genocide. And you've been coming with 15 teachers every year. Tell me about that experience.
Well, thank you. It was a long time dream of ours to make this happen. And we were finally able to get it started in 2022. So now we're on our 4th cohort of selecting 15 teachers from states all across the U.S. So we now have, my math isn't good, 60 teachers and 34 states that they represent. Hopefully we'll get to 50 states at one point. Some states are harder to crack than others.
Give me their names.
So, yes. And so These teachers go through a selection process that includes the fact that they're already somewhat aware and include something about the Armenian Genocide in their curriculum. These are mostly high school, mostly social studies, but some English language arts, which might sound odd.
Yeah, because you mentioned that before the interview a couple of times. I'm thinking, why English language arts?
English language arts includes literature courses,
okay.
English literature, especially since the 100th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide in 2015. We have numerous very, very useful high school level English literature books, memoirs, even fictional accounts of, or historical fiction and memoirs about the Armenian Genocide. Students very often in those courses in high school, they'll read one or two books related to the Holocaust, or other real historical events, but as novels or as memoirs. There's no reason why the Armenian Genocide can't be included in those. And actually, when it is included in that curriculum, students get a deeper understanding than maybe those other world history classes, because they're usually spending multiple weeks on one book. And they're having discussions about each chapter, and they're going back and looking at other additional resources connected to that story, whether it's Armenian Genocide testimonies or artifacts or so forth, or cultural elements. So we found that the English teachers are very special in how they approach this and how deeply their students
because
get
I
it.
remember when I was in high school in Canada and we were doing world history and studying the world wars. Of course, there was no mention of Armenians back then, and when you said Armenia, half the people, 90% of people didn't know what that meant. And I remember reading books, and we've all, I think, had to read Diary of Anne Frank and all of that, but to hear that those kinds of memoirs are now being read about the Armenian Genocide by American students, it's pretty incredible. So now, okay, you answered the question, why English language arts?
That's right. Yeah. And so when the teachers first, once we select them, we meet with them over Zoom across the country several times before we get to Armenia. And so we prepare them. They have homeworks and assignments before they get here. They need background. We want to take this as far and as intensive in learning as we can with them. And they arrive. We spend most of our mornings, at the Armenian Genocide Museum Institute, which has been a phenomenal partner for us. Just phenomenal partner. We are on kind of the same wavelength with everything we'd like to do. Our professors and their professors are seamlessly working together, and their researchers to bring the most intensive lessons we can to the teachers. They get also a deep dive into the exhibits at the museum, and they don't get your average tour docent walking them through. They get very specialized introductions to each of the segments of the exhibits in a way that's useful for teachers, for high school students in the United States. And that's extremely valuable. And then they get to go through on their own several more times, and with the benefit of the researchers at AGMI to help them interpret a lot of it. So they really get that. And various lectures, discussions, workshops, discussions about how now they're going to translate this to the classroom and to other teachers when they return. In the afternoons, we have field trips that connect directly with the content of the morning lectures and the morning workshops. For instance, they're going to learn about Armenian independence of 1918 and then the Soviet period after that, etc. So in the afternoon, we're going to Sardarabad, and we're seeing the artifacts that were connected to the actual Sardara battles, and various things like that. We have another wonderful partnership with the American University of Armenia. It's very important for us. As you've just heard, we're not just teaching about the Armenian Genocide, but we're also teaching about Armenian history that came before that, and Armenian history that came after that, and the legacy today. It's very important that they're here in Armenia, that they understand, to the extent that we could provide it in such a short period of time, the current conditions Armenia is facing, the political sphere, the economic sphere, this educational sphere that the teachers are most interested in, the social conditions, and the legacies of the Soviet period as well, and how Armenia is trying to reform to improve lives for everybody, etc. So that at AUA, they get a session with professors that teach these topics and can impart an overview of each of those spheres of the Armenian society to our teachers, but also they meet with professors who teach in the human rights courses. And that's been a very interesting discussion between our teachers and the AUA professors about how do you teach this topic? How do the AUA professors approach this topic in the classroom to students that may have personal experience with genocide in their own lives or in their family histories and with the conditions they're living in now, compared to the American students who may be clueless.
I'm smiling, not happily, but, I also teach at the American University, and unfortunately, tragically, we have been experiencing and living the war, then the blockade of Artsakh, and then the ethnic cleansing, and then the loss of Artsakh in real time. And often, I remember the day the war ended, November 9, 2020. I was teaching at the same time while reporting for EVN. It was just, I have no words to describe what we were experiencing, but I hadn't slept that whole night, slept at 6 a.m, put my alarm for 8:30 because I said I have to get to class because the students are going to need me, right? I get to class at 9:30 and I'm there because I think the students, and they don't want to talk about it. And so now you're an educator. You don't know how to deal with this. Do you push because they don't want to talk about it? We did something completely unrelated because that's what they needed. So this is really important for educators to understand when history is unfolding and you have to teach it. How do you do it? It's pretty challenging.
Our education director, Carrie Flynn, she's American. She's had 25 years in the classroom in Missouri, starting with English, then history, and then she created her own semester course on genocide. And now she's our education director running all our education programs. Her approach for our teachers in the U.S., and it can only be, it's even more relevant for people in Europe, for Armenian schools here, is the motto, safe in, safe out, meaning take care of those students, have it feel like a safe place when they're going to be learning about this material or talking about this material or relating this material to their personal lives, because who knows what trauma they've been through.
Sure.
And then safe out. And then you have your lesson with that safe space and you close it with something that leaves them feeling safe again.
Right.
It's a challenge, but our teachers have been very appreciative of that approach. And I, not being a teacher myself, didn't quite understand it. Now I do. And especially at AUA, when I've been there these last couple of years, I see how important it would be.
Looking ahead, what's next for the Genocide Education Program?
We're all about expansion. We're all about expansion. So we now have 60 educators who are Gen Ed teacher fellows. They may have finished their requirement of when they return over the course of the next school year training at least 20 other teachers, but they're not just dropping the material after that, right? They're continuing to teach it and they're continuing to share it with other teachers. So we created a formula, a mathematical formula. I didn't do it myself. I got a mathematician to help us. He happens to be my nephew.
Family comes in handy.
Yes. To come up with a formula to figure out if we have each of our teacher fellows teaches approximately 100 new high school students every year. They teach about 4 or 5 classes. Each class that year has 20 or 30 students in it. So by the end of the year, they're teaching 100 new students. And then the next year, 100 more. And then the next year, 100 more. But they are also each of those 15 per
year.
Gen Ed Teacher Fellowship Program year are training 20 other teachers. So then add on that, each of those 20 are also teaching 100 the following year and the following year and the following year. So you can see how from one year to the next, there's just going to be this exponential growth. It's not going to just be 15 teachers. It's going to be so much more. So the calculation came to if we can afford, because we have to raise money for this project, afford to keep this going for 10 years. We're now on year 4. We will, by the end of those 10 years, have been responsible for educating 1 million new students. And that's where we want to expand this. And I think it will even be more than that, because what has happened during these few years that we've been doing the program is word has gotten out. We're getting more and more requests than ever before from all over the country, from school districts that want to have us come into their district and give a workshop for them, because the word has got out, as I said, and now we've got all these teachers in all these different states. So we've been expanding all of our other activities in the U.S. besides the teacher fellowship. So that's been a huge expansion. It's going to continue to be. Plus, we've created like our alumni group, and it's called the Gen Ed Varbets.
I love it.
So at the end of each year, we ask the teacher fellows, your responsibility to your formal responsibility to the program is over, but would you like to continue working with us?
And I'm sure
almost
they all do.
Every single one said yes. And so we keep in contact with them. We've been asking them for help in updating some of our lesson plans. We've been asking them for help to give a workshop in a remote place that they're closer to than we are. We've been asking them to, if they're interested in, on Gen Ed's behalf, of proposing a workshop at a conference near them or whatever it is. So in that way, we're also expanding this activity all over. So, yeah.
You know, working at a nonprofit media, I know how difficult it is to raise funds. Where are you getting your funding and how can people support this?
Well, thank you for asking. Individual donations, some Armenian-based foundations, and a couple of state grants.
Okay.
Okay.
But it's always never enough with the state funding, I'm sure. So people need to really support a program that in 10 years will have reached 1 million students learning about Armenian genocide, Armenian identity, history, the country, all of that. You're doing God's work, really. But I do want to, you know, I've been thinking a lot since I wanted to interview you the last couple of days and doing my research and such. And, you know, for our generation, or for many of us living in the diaspora, regardless of generation, I think the genocide was a very defining moment that, you know, this transgenerational trauma that we, you know, my grandparents, were orphans of the genocide. And that's how I formed my Armenian identity and all of that. And your family history, your mother, we were talking earlier, Helen Dadayan, right, with her story of this, you know, medieval Bible that she had and she gifted to the Madina Taran. And I was watching you voice over the story of your mother and thinking, it's a legacy that we carry, and now you're paying it forward in ways that will have a lasting impact. So thank you. It was a little preachy on my part, but I really wanted to say that this is the kind of work that few people with a vision can make huge changes.
Thank you so much for your interest. Thank you for disseminating this information to others. I do want, mostly the Genocide Education Project, our outreach has been to Americans, right? American schools, American teachers. So sometimes Armenians are a little bit surprised to hear about this. Like, why haven't we heard about this?
Well, we could be doing this in Canada. We could be doing this in France or in Australia, right? So it's just about, you now have the prototype that could be used by other Armenian activists, community members in any country in the world.
Yes.
So hopefully they're listening.
Hopefully they're listening. There's been some outreach. There's been some connections to them. If anybody who's listening wants to learn more about the Genocide Education Project, genocideeducation.org.
Yep. And then you can press the contribute button too. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.